In the context of exploring the phenomenon of consciousness and understanding, the Chinese room argument asserts that no matter how sophisticated a program a digital computer is executing, it is not capable of possessing cognitive states such as a mind or consciousness. This complex philosophical argument, originally put forth by John Searle in 1980 in his paper Minds, Brains, and Programs, primarily challenges the foundational ideas of functionalism and computationalism. These philosophical stances maintain that the mind can be equated to an information processing system working with formal symbols and that replicating a mental state equals experiencing it. Searle's argument goes against a specific viewpoint known as the strong AI hypothesis, which states that a suitably programmed computer, given the correct inputs and outputs, could have a mind in the same manner as humans do. Though the Chinese room argument emerged as a response to assertions by AI advocates, it doesn't argue against the aims of core AI research. Rather, it merely points out that any exhibited intelligence doesn't imply genuine understanding or consciousness. It specifically applies to digital computers and not machines at large. The linchpin of Searle's argument, the Chinese room thought experiment, envisages a scenario in which a computer is developed that behaves as if it has understanding of the Chinese language. It receives Chinese characters as input and, guided by a computer program, outputs Chinese characters that convince a native Chinese speaker that the program is a real Chinese-speaking human due to its convincing responses to all posed questions, not unlike passing the Turing test. However, Searle asks whether this machine truly understands Chinese, or if it's merely imitating the ability. This dichotomy forms the core of the debate between strong AI and weak AI. Further extending the thought experiment, Searle imagines himself in a sealed room with just a program's English variant, as well as all necessary stationery and filing spaces. He could take in Chinese characters for processing, follow the steps laid down by the program, and output Chinese characters, all without comprehending the content. If a computer passing the Turing test in this manner implies understanding, Searle posits he would understand Chinese too, simply from executing the program. Searle proposes that understanding and intentionality are vital for defining an entity's actions as thinking. An absence of these attributes dismisses the notion of these machines harboring a mind as humans comprehend it. Thus, he asserts the falsity of the strong A theory. A comparable argument was leveraged against mechanism by Gottfried Leibniz in 1714, evoking the concept of hypothetically expanding the brain into a colossal mill. He struggled to conceive such a mechanism ever gaining the capacity for perception. Anatoly Dmitrov, a Soviet cyberneticist, echoed these sentiments in his 1961 short story The Game. The crux of the tale is to question whether mathematical machines possess the ability to think. Dmitrov, echoing Searle's conclusions, verifies that a simulation cannot truly represent the thinking process. In the 1970s, Lawrence Davis and Ned Block proposed thought experiments around brain simulations utilizing telephone lines in offices or the entire population of China, known as the Chinese gem, brain or the Chinese gem. Searle further developed his version in his 1980 paper, generating a significant number of essays and responses, making it one of the most influential and intensely debated philosophical arguments within cognitive science over the past few decades. Searle's argument proved to be controversial, with many researchers striving to refute it. However, it has garnered respect within the cognitive science sphere, its clarity and influence undebated. Originally a critique of AI researchers' claims, it has now been embraced as a crucial component of the philosophy of mind. This poses significant challenges to functionalism and computational theories of mind, and is linked to complex philosophical conundrums such as the mind-body problem, the issue of other minds, the symbol grounding problem, and the inexplicable enigma of consciousness. The debate within the field of artificial intelligence, i.e., circles around whether a machine can truly possess a mind or merely mimic its functions. As per John Searle's terminology, the belief in the former is labeled as strong A and the latter as weak A. Early A pioneers such as Herbert A. Simon, along with Alan Newell and Cliff Shaw, shockingly claimed that machines possessing the ability to think, learn, and create were already a reality in 1955, after they developed the first A program, the logic theorist. This bold assertion, in essence, proclaimed a resolution to the ancient mind-body conundrum of how a physical entity, such as the brain, could radiate properties of mind. Adding another voice to the chorus, John Searle reinforced that AI is the pursuit to create machines that house minds, implying that humans, fundamentally, are machines themselves. Further, Searle denotes a pair of additional beliefs held by strong AI advocates: that neuroscience does not inform understanding of the mind, and that psychological attributes can be determined solely based on the Turing test. In more recent discourse on the topic, Searle categorizes strong AI as computer functionalism, courtesy of philosopher Daniel Dennett. He defines the position as the belief in outlining mental experiences by their function with respect to each other and their interaction with the environment. This implies that if a computer runs the right program to replicate these functions, it can possess mental conscious phenomena. Stephen Harnaud offers another perspective, proposing that Searle's portrayal of strong A better fits the framework of computationalism. It's a philosophical stance that qualifies the mind as an information processing unit, a theory accepted more widely than strong A. It holds valid critical value. The principles that underpin computationalism state: mental conditions are computational states, allowing machines to have such states. The software determines these computational states, rendering the hardware irrelevant, and the functionality of a system is the only empirical evidence of significance, making the Turing test definitive. Searle posits that to achieve consciousness and comprehension, specific biological processes inherent to the brain are required. This concept, biological naturalism, argues that the awareness of consciousness cannot be conclusively determined merely by analyzing the functioning of a system, because it considers the unique neurological configuration of the brain to be paramount. Opposition is therefore posed to behaviorism and functionalism, inclusive of computer functionalism or a strong A. Critically, biological naturalism diverges from identity theory, which theorizes that mental conditions are identical to neurological events due to Searle's technical objections. Furthermore, both biological naturalism and strong AI challenge Cartesian dualism, a concept which asserts the brain and mind consist of different substances. In this context, Searle argues that strong A's validity relies on this dualistic, brain-irrelevant assumption. Initially, Searle stressed understanding as essential mental states with so-called intentionality, not directly engaging with related concepts like consciousness. However, recent theories include consciousness as the focal point of the argument. Computational models alone, he contends, do not equate to consciousness. Similarly to how a computational model of a rainstorm won't drench you, computational models of consciousness aren't inherently conscious. Chalmers and McGinn similarly argue consciousness as the crux of the Chinese room scenario. It indicates that the question of consciousness proves fundamentally elusive, not questioning machines' ability to be conscious, but whether it can be verifiably established. They argue that any method would face the same challenges in principle as exchanging questions in Chinese. However, Searle argues that this is only true for observers outside the room, as the thought experiment aims to position someone inside, allowing them direct observation of consciousness operations. From this perspective, Searle affirms that there's nothing that could plausibly originate consciousness besides himself, eliminating the possibility of a non-Chinese speaking mind. The debate around the Chinese room argument is primarily rooted in the realm of mind philosophy, with most AI researchers and computer science experts regarding it as unrelated to their specific fields. Despite this, understanding the argument necessitates an appreciation of computer science concepts like Turing machines and symbol processing. Searle's propositions are rarely considered an obstacle in AI research, which mainly aims to produce functionally intelligent systems, irrespective of whether the intelligence they exhibit is simulated or not. AI experts, such as Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig, allude to their interest in creating programs that display intelligent behavior, including aspects of consciousness like awareness and self-awareness. However, they clarify their unpreparedness to tackle the creation of machines possessing human-like consciousness. While Searle accepts that AI technology can create machines displaying high levels of intelligent behavior, his Chinese room argument suggests the possibility of a digital device outsmarting humans, yet lacking a mind and intentionality in the same sense as human brains. It's crucial not to mistake Searle's strong A hypothesis with the strong A, referred to by futurist Ray Kurzweil and alike, who define it as machine intelligence matching or surpassing human cognition, while Kurzweil principally refers to the intelligence level exhibited by the machine. The strength in Searle's argument is not bound by any such limit. In his argument, Searle contests that a machine, even with superintelligence, doesn't necessarily possess consciousness or a mind. The Chinese room argument employs a Turing test version elucidated by Alan Turing in 1950 to address the query, can machines think? In the standard model, if a human judge following a natural language conversation with both a human and a design machine fails to distinguish the machine from the human, the machine is deemed to have passed the test. Turing sorted out each potential objection to machines can think and found straightforward responses once the question is uncomplicated in such a manner. Nevertheless, Turing didn't create the test to assess consciousness or understanding presence, considering those irrelevant to the problems he was keen on solving, according to Searle, who delves into the secret world of mind and consciousness. These are the mysteries that matter. The Chinese room, according to him, demonstrates that the Turing test isn't infallible, hence incapable of detecting consciousness presence, even though the room may embody or function as if it has a conscious mind. Searle underscores the idea that computers only manipulate symbols syntactically, much like grammar rules are used in linguistic studies, yet they lack any comprehension of the symbol's semantics or meaning. This alludes to the theory proposed by Newell and Simon that a physical symbol system, including computers, has the capacity for general intelligent action, or what we now view as artificial general intelligence. Their philosophical standpoint, despite Searle's Chinese room argument, remains unfazed as it focuses on intelligent action, the machine's external behavior, rather than cognitive aspects like understanding or consciousness. The Chinese room, designed similarly to a modern computer, employs the use of von Neumann architecture, which includes several components: the program, a set of instructions, memory storage, a QPU, the man, executing instructions, and a tool for writing symbols in memory. In the theoretical realm of computer science, such a machine is known as Turing complete, as it has the necessary apparatus to perform computations similar to a Turing machine and potentially mimic other digital machines, given time and sufficient memory. Alan Turing asserts that in essence, all digital computers are equivalent, a concept supported by the Church. Turing thesis suggesting that a Turing machine can compute any function from an effective procedure. The Chinese room's Turing completeness implies its ability to perform operations similar to any other digital machine. This leads Searle to reason that if the Chinese room is incapable of understanding the Chinese language, no other digital computer possesses cognitive abilities. Nonetheless, there are detractors like Hanoch Ben-Yami who argue that the Chinese room lacks the all-encompassing abilities of a digital computer, such as the ability to tell time. Searle, however, defends his argument with a more formal model, with the Chinese room argument serving as evidence for a key point: the difference between syntax and semantics. He starts with a few axioms, like a program uses syntax for symbol manipulation without paying heed to their meaning. Unlike human thoughts that are imbued with meaning and representative power, he finally posits that syntax, in itself, doesn't constitute nor is it sufficient for semantics. The main point is this: computer programs, according to the argument, cannot have semantics because they only have syntax, which alone cannot generate semantics. Thus, the argument reasons computer programs cannot be considered to have minds, as all minds inherently have semantics. This perspective argues against the possibility of artificial intelligence creating a machine with a mind using program symbol manipulation. Now turning to the human brain, is it running a program following the computational theory of mind, so to speak? Starting from the accepted scientific consensus that brains create minds, the argument establishes that the human brain must possess something that fosters the existence of a mind, a term coined by Searle as causal powers. If any other entity can stimulate a mind into existence, it required these equivalent causal powers. Further conclusions emerge from this premise. Artifacts generating mental phenomena or artificial brains would need to replicate the unique causal powers of the human brain, something a formal program alone cannot accomplish. To put it another way, if programs lack these equivalent causal powers which produce minds, then programs cannot be the mechanism by which brains produce minds. Responses to this argument differ. While computationalists and functionalists defy Searle's argument that syntax alone can incorporate semantics if it boasts the right functional structure, eliminative materialists dispute the claim that minds possess semantics, contending instead that thoughts and mental activities are inherently meaningless despite functioning as if meaningful. Rebuttals to Searle's position vary. Some propose modifications to the Chinese room, Others challenge the argument's assumptions pertaining to subjective conscious experience, thus suggesting that it doesn't actually prove anything. There are multiple debates trying to locate the mind in the room and addressing fundamental questions pertaining to mind vs. body and simulation. Vs. body and simulation vs. reality. Any defense identifying a mind in the room falls into the category of the system reply. Searle contends that accepting the reply that consciousness can sprout from an information processing system requires an ideological subscription. His simplification of objects. The man who has memorized the rules and internalized all aspects in his head counters the system's comprehension argument if a man doesn't understand Chinese. He posits that their overlapping categorization denies the system's knowledge or understanding of Chinese language. Critics counter Searle, arguing that a man provided with a program can possess dual minds. When a mind is considered a mode of information processing, computational theory can rationalize two simultaneous computations, one for universal programmability and the other illustrating the Turing machine explained by the program. The theory therefore explains that Chinese room could possess human, like semantic comprehension of Chinese inputs. More nuanced versions of Searle's reply aim to delineate more precisely what the system refers to. Some term it as the software, others as a program, a running program, or even a simulated mind. Marvin Minsky introduces the virtual mind reply, a concept rooted in computer science analogous to virtual objects, files, and folders in a computer. He suggests mind could also be virtual, akin to virtual machines or communities. David Cole differentiates the basic systems reply from the virtual mind reply. He posits that while one system can run multiple simulations simultaneously, each simulation may denote a discrete virtual mind. Thus, a system does not necessarily translate into the mind. The question of whether the human brain is more akin to a mathematical device pre-programmed with data or a complexly woven natural phenomenon that cannot be fully replicated by a machine remains a conundrum. This topic has prompted decades of debate among AI experts and philosophers, leading to the consideration of the term synthetic intelligence over the often used artificial. This discussion also touches on whether or not a system can comprehend Chinese. If it's acknowledged that an entity other than the person in the room can grasp this language, then it challenges Searle's argument that if the man does not understand Chinese, then there's no chance of anything else in the space comprehending it. However, this doesn't validate that strong A is genuine either, as it doesn't demonstrate that the system or virtual mind comprehends Chinese unless it can pass the Turing test. Should strong AI be viewed as somewhat plausible, the Chinese room experiment necessitates an explanation. It proves challenging to elucidate how awareness might rise from the room or if the system can even achieve consciousness. Searle suggests the response that the system must grasp Chinese avoids the question or is circular reasoning. The individual within the room views the symbols as arbitrary. However, if the Chinese room truly possesses understanding, then these symbols must derive their significance from a source. This line of reasoning links symbols to the things they signify, addressing Searle's concerns about intentionality, symbol grounding, and syntax vs. semantics. What if the program was in a robot with the freedom to interact with its surroundings? This yields the possibility of a causal connection, forming between the symbols and what they represent, as elaborated by Hans Moravec. Still, Searle contends that even if robotic appendages influence the inputs and outputs, the person manipulating the symbols remains blind to their meaning. Responses from others indicate that the room, as defined by Searle, is interconnected to the world through the Chinese speakers communicating with it and the individuals coding its knowledge base. To Searle, the manipulated symbols bear a derived connotation, akin to words in a book. The symbol's significance relies on the understanding of the participants and programmers outside the room, as the room, similar to a book, doesn't comprehend its own functions. For advocates who believe that Searle's actions mimic an independent mind, the salient inquiry is not the meaning of symbols to Searle, but their significance to the mimicked mind. Though Searle is confined in the room, the mimicked mind remains connected to the world via its communication with Chinese speakers, its programmers, and through sensors provided by roboticists. These discussions all emanate from the system's reply, identifying a unique system or technology as crucial in generating conscious understanding in a machine. Likewise, the robot and common sense knowledge responses emphasize the significance of particular systems. Just imagine the program replicating in detail every neuronal activity of a Chinese speaker's brain. This thought augments the impression that the program's operation would barely differ from that of a living human brain. However, Searle counters that this simulation fails to capture vital brain characteristics, its causal and intentional states. He firmly believes that human mental phenomena are reliant on the actual physical and chemical properties of live human brains. Moreover, Searle proposes an alternative scenario: a man controlling a complex system of water pipes, adjusting valves according to a program in English, mirroring the symbolic receipt of Chinese information. Each water connection represents a synapse in the Chinese brain after correct operation of the valves mimicking neuron firings. The answers in Chinese are produced. The question arises, where does the understanding lie in this system? It accepts, simulates, and produces Chinese, but neither the man nor the pipes understand Chinese. If we are drawn to the implausible notion that understanding is present in the man-pipe conjunction, it should be noted the man could theoretically internalize the role of pipes, performing all neuron firings imaginatively. Two variations based on the brain simulator reply include the China brain and the brain. Replacement scenarios. Conceptualize each citizen of China mimicking one neuron with the telephone system simulating neural connections. While no individual could understand the entire system, the telephony-based brain would functionally mirror a real brain, raising the possibility of system consciousness if consciousness is a function. There are arguments that propose the potential for massive parallel connectionist architecture, akin to a brain simulator, to have the capability of comprehension. This argument merges the concepts of mechanized body and brain simulation to postulate the existence of a machine mind. Preparing for technological advancements, these arguments anticipate computers that comprehend. While Searle agrees with the existence of non-biological forms of conscious understanding, he considers this an unrelated point. He further points out that the arguments propose a type of technology that, theoretically, echoes human consciousness in machines. These arguments can be interpreted in two ways. Either they claim that such technology is a prerequisite for consciousness, and therefore the Chinese room is incapable of consciousness due to its inability to implement this technology, or they propose that recognizing the mind of the Chinese room is easier when visualizing this technology as its creator. Searle's counterargument posits that strong A's is defunct when consciousness requires characteristics such as a mechanized body or connectionist architecture. According to Searle, the Chinese room embodies all elements of a Turing-complete machine, thus enabling it to simulate any digital computation consequently. If the Chinese room cannot pass the Turing test, no other digital technology could. Conversely, if it can pass but does not possess a mind, the Turing test cannot accurately determine the existence of a mind. Hence, Searle claims this undermines the premises of strong A. This argument extends to brain arguments that challenge strong AI from the perspective that no program can adequately replicate the complexity of the mind. Searle reminds us that the core concept of strong A is to understand the mind without understanding the workings of the brain. According to him, if computation cannot elucidate the human mind, strong AI has failed. Other critics argue that Searle's room does possess a mind, albeit an unrecognizable one. They propose a more realistic design of the room in order to make its mind more apparent. Ned Block's counterargument, a simple lookup table that can be rearranged into any form, even a brain simulation, suggests that the mind is far more complex than the strong A claims of consciousness encapsulated within a singular large number. Despite the impossibility of such a large look table, these arguments reveal the intricate specificity required to echo human consciousness in machines. Below is the illustration of how a mindset-speaking Chinese could exist in the confines of Searle's room, or how the icons he handles could possess meaning. Nevertheless, they raise skepticism, supporting contrasting ideas like the system and robot rebuttals, thereby challenging Searle's presumptions. If these contentions are assumed as valid, they obstruct Searle from asserting that his conclusion is unambiguous by weakening the intuitions he relies on for assurance. Several reviewers posit that Searle's argument is entirely dependent on intuitions. For instance, Ned Block alludes to Searle's reliance on the notion that some entities do not think, while Daniel Dennett tags Searle's Chinese room argument as a deceiving intuition pump. Dennett asserts that Searle's hypotheses rely on imagining a simplistic, irrelevant scenario and drawing conclusions from it. Several arguments could also be seen as appeals to intuition. especially those meant to validate the existence of a mind in Chinese room, including rebuttals focusing on robots, common sense understanding, brain simulation, and connectivity. Several of these rebuttals also address the complexity of the concept with the connectivity reply, asserting that an operational artificial intelligence system would need to mimic the complexity and interconnectedness of the human brain. The common sense rebuttal insists that any program that successfully passes a Turing test would need to be adroit, advanced, and multi-layered, brimming with meta-knowledge. Several critiques underscore the speed and complexity of the human brain, which, according to some estimates, processes information at the rate of 100 billion operations per second. Some critics underline that the man in the room would need millions of years to answer a simple question and would require astronomical amounts of storage, thereby casting doubt on the certainty of Searle's intuition. Paul and Patricia Churchland propose a thought experiment to illustrate the speed and complexity reply. If a man in a dark room moved a bar magnet or charged object up and down rapidly, it should theoretically emit light according to Maxwell's theory of artificial luminance. However, in reality, forces do not produce luminance, even when set in motion. Churchland's point is that to visually perceive any light, the magnet would need to wave astronomically fast, something like 450 trillion times per second. Stephen Harnad criticizes speed and complexity responses when they go beyond addressing our intuitions. He states that considering computational processes undergoing a transition into mental ones when accelerated to the right speed is not a valid counterargument but merely speculative thinking. He maintains that it is merely a matter of cranking up the complexity to the correct degree. Several responses challenge Searle's argument, suggesting that his perceptions about consciousness and the mind are flawed. Searle contends that humans experience their consciousness, intentionality, and the essence of the mind directly and on a daily basis. He argues that this consciousness experience isn't disputable, and we must assume the reality and understandability of the mental. The following responses scrutinize whether Searle's self-awareness of consciousness validates it as something beyond mere mechanical symbol processing. Specifically, the other mind's reply proposes that we can't utilize our perception of consciousness to decipher other minds, including potential artificial minds. The eliminative materialist reply counters that Searle's consciousness doesn't exist in the way he presumes, and the epiphenoma counterarguments ponder whether we can form an argument about an abstract concept, like consciousness, that is outside the bounds of experimental detection. The other mind's reply highlights that Searle's argument essentially applies the problem of other minds to AE, noting that there's no definitive way to establish if others' subjective experience mirrors our own. Critics suggest that Searle is applying an impossibly high standard to the Chinese room experiment, beyond the standard applied to regular human cognition. Nielsen counters, if a program behaves as though it were performing multiplication, most of us would agree that it is indeed multiplying. Searle, for all we know, might just be pretending to think deeply about these matters. Alan Turing foresaw this debate. He named it the argument from consciousness and offered the other mind's reply. He observed that people do not usually entertain the problem of other minds when interacting with each other. The Turing test extends this polite convention to AE, with no intention of resolving the problem of other minds definitively. Finally, some philosophers argue against Searle's conception of consciousness, advocating a position known as eliminative materialism. This viewpoint posits that consciousness cannot be reduced to a strictly mechanical explanation, but will instead be eradicated from our understanding once we fully comprehend the workings of the material brain. This thought has been earlier demonstrated with the elimination of the concept of a demon from scientific understanding. Daniel Dennett defines consciousness as a user illusion, with other mental properties such as original intentionality being special attributes tied to beliefs and other proposition-oriented attitude. Searle's theory of consciousness, intentionality, and mind implies that the existence of consciousness is an epiphenomenon, untraceable within the visible world. This theory rests on his assertion of causal properties, inherent to the mind and undetectable externally in the context of the Chinese room experiment. The absence of a Chinese speaker would go unnoticed, as such properties are undetected by those outside of it. Hence, according to Searle, consciousness and these properties remain undetermined and potentially irrelevant. Daniel Dennett proposes an illustrative example of a human born without these properties, dubbed a zombie in philosophical discussions around the mind. These individuals would behave identically to humans, yet be inherently different. Over time, human evolution would err toward these genetically simpler zombies, suggesting that the current human species could actually be said zombies. Adamant in their belief of consciousness, however, it's impossible to determine our state of consciousness. Mike Alder, supporting this theory, implies the argument is futile in his Newton's flaming laser sword reply, since distinguishing between simulating a mind and possessing a mind remains undefined and unverifiable. Alder states it's irrelevant due to the lack of experiments distinguishing between the two. Contrarily, Searle argues the study of the mind stems from facts setting apart humans from inanimate objects, such as beliefs. He contends that the presence of consciousness is perceivable and dismisses the counter-arguments. Margaret Bowden navigates this debate by suggesting that lack of understanding in the Chinese room does not imply a lack of understanding in general. The room occupant, at minimum, comprehends the rulebook linked to output responses. The dynamics of the Chinese room are central to Peter Watts's novels Blind Sights and Echopraxia, Greg Egan's short story Learning to Be Me, and the video game Zero Escape. Virtue's Last Reward. Liu Cixin's novel The Three-Body Problem also envisions a similar human computer embodying millions of soldiers performing different logical circuits.